Hello everyone and welcome to the Gunpla Network. I'm the Spicer and today's review of the high-grade Cosmic Era Freedom Gundam comes to you courtesy of those fine folks over at Canadian Gundam.
Canadian Gundam is your one-stop shop for all things Gunpla and Plamo here in North America. With a private warehouse option, flat rate shipping to the US and Canada, and a vast catalog that's restocked regularly, they've got you covered. When you're placing your next order, don't forget to use the promo code Gunpla Network to save 10% off. I do apologize for my type of cough, but my overall thoughts on the high-grade Cosmic Era Freedom are pretty positive. I was a little skeptical, and knowing how the proportions of this were in the clear color version, I figured they would be the same here, and, well, they are, but being in a solid color regular variant I think helps it a little bit. The stickers are mostly not on the main body and relegated largely to just the accessories, with the exception being the side skirt rail cannons. The red on both ends is a set of stickers and they fit fairly well, but they will probably be subject to peeling up. You do have some stickers on the wings, but they're largely relegated to the cannons, and inside the wings you don't see them very much. You do have a sticker on the rifle as well as the shield, but for the most part they all work fairly well and don't have to go around too many different corners. Overall, I'm pretty pleased. Having this on my shelf and looking at it for a while and posing it for this review, I'm growing fonder of it. I'm still not 100% sold on it. I think the proportions on the L Strike are still better, but there are some really nice poses you can get this in that really sell a anime accurate look, as wonky as that may appear sometimes. As we look at just the details of the kit, it is actually very nice looking. It's not the real grade, of course. It's not going to have all the panel lining opportunities or color separation, but as I said, the main body and pretty much everything you're going to look at, aside from the rail cannons, is all molded in plastic, and that's pretty awesome. You even get the option for little silver foils to go behind the eyes, and the clear yellow actually catches light pretty well. It is a little hard to get light in there, but at the right angle, they shine very, very brightly. As far as plastic separation goes, you have the blue, red, and white on the shoulders, all working in conjunction well. You also have the inner frame, the vents, the chest, the little red piece, and the blue and white section for the torso, all fitting together well, all being entirely plastic. The rail cannons, of course, are the kind of one sticker issue you have with this kit, and the legs look fine. The more I've looked at this kit, the more I've come to figure out why I have issues with proportions. And even though it grows on me, the rail cannons I perceive to be the largest problem. I think they're just a little bit too big in both length and width, so if they were scaled down just a little bit, they would probably work a lot better with the overall symmetry of this design. Now, I would also say the legs could be a little bit longer and the arms could be a little bit beefier, but overall that's kind of my personal preference and maybe not specifically what this kit needs. As we take the backpack off and look at the upper portion here, you get a good look at the plastic and the molding differences here. The vents do go into a set of molded vents as well, I guess is the way to phrase that. The little gray vent pieces fit over some pre-molded vents. As long as you hit them with a little bit of panel lining marker, they stand out a little bit. If you want to go over them with a different color, you absolutely can. It won't be screen accurate, but to each their own. Overall, the only thing missing from the torso would be the little Vulcans being molded in a different color, but once again, as with the Strike, that's asking a little bit too much for a pretty reasonably priced high grade. As we take a look at the head in particular, I wanted to show off those foil stickers behind the eyes, and as it comes around here, you get to see that. I initially thought the head sculpt was a little bit too big, but after looking at it next to the Freedom 2.0 Master Grade, I've come to decide that's really not the case. It might be just a hair too big, but it's really not the main culprit of this kit. As we move to the legs, that's the main culprit. The rail cannons are probably the biggest downside to this kit. They're functional and they work and they look fine for the most part, but I think they do make the legs feel just a little bit too small due to the kind of really long front end there that sticks down, which you can sweep back, which is not a terribly hard thing to do. However, it's just something that has stuck out to me and bothered me a little bit. Outside of that, the legs don't have a ton of panel lining opportunity, but provide just about as much as you would get on the shoulders, which is where most of the panel lining is going to come from onto the main body. Nothing else really to write home about on the legs. They work just fine, and they don't really have any special moving vents or anything, so what you see is what you get. This is another kit, much like the Strike, that you'll want up on a stand. Personally, I'm going to most likely leave this with the two beam sabers, but if you do want to go sword and beam rifle, shield and beam rifle, you absolutely can. I will say that the beam rifle is a little bit heavier than the Strikes, which results in the fairly weak wrist peg being pulled out, so keep that in mind. It is a little hard to get that beam rifle where you want it, but with just a little bit of super glue or polish, add a little friction to it, it should be fine. The shield, however, is a different story. The handle, I guess, just the handle, is the only thing you can use to hold the shield. The Freedom does not have a peg in the back of its forearm, so you're really limited on what you can hold, and if you do work with it a little bit, you can probably get some good poses, and the handle does fit in a couple of different spots on the shield. However, it doesn't fit very well in the hand, so it does like to move around a lot. Definitely by far not my favorite set of accessories, but they're there, and even with stickers on them, they end up looking pretty good. Now, if you don't want to use any weapons, but you want to use the high-speed dynamic of the Freedom Gundam with the wings swept back, you absolutely can with some effect parts. Here, it looks like it's kind of gliding across the water, if you will, flying really fast towards something, maybe to ruin Kigali's wedding, maybe to steal someone's fiance. It's hard to say, and technically both of those are the same thing, but regardless, if you do want these kind of dynamic poses, you can absolutely get them, and the wings usually are pretty beneficial. I will expound on this more, but the wings are probably the thing that sets this the most apart from the real grade in terms of finickiness. The wings here are much more solid. The real grades, there's just not a lot of stability there, and while they do offer greater part separation and more detail, they tend to not like to stay in place without a lot of extra work, so I would prefer the high grade in this particular instance. As we crack out the beam sabers, these are by far my favorite accessories, just because, well, they work. As I said with the shield and the beam rifle, they don't like to hold in there, and when they do, they usually like to pull the wrist out with them. You spread the wings out here, get a fairly dynamic pose, angle the torso down a little bit, and you have a pretty cool set of beam sabers. They do also attach at the end, as you saw in the beginning of this video, so you have a couple of different options as well. And with Kira's signature style kind of being the backhanded grip, if you will, you can absolutely do that. They don't fall out. The beam sabers are held in there very well, and the arms move around enough, as do the wings, to allow you to get some pretty cool looking slashing poses, either forwards or backwards. I will say the wings do like to butt into the shoulders, but you do have enough articulation in both to where it's not really a major problem, just something you need to think about when you're posing this up. Now, if you want to go full burst mode, or whatever it is they call it, I can't remember in the show, you do have the two rail cannons on the side and the two big beam cannons. I have a harder time getting the beam cannons where I like them, but I think this pose is probably just about as good as I'm going to get. The wings splay out very nice, add a lot of shelf presence to this as well, and really you can't tell the stickers are too noticeable, at least on the beam cannons. They're there, they're the little red pinstripes, and of course, well, paint will look better. Even if you have it out in this mode a lot, you're really not going to have too many issues with them being super noticeable. However, they may peel up as they are two separate stickers going over a couple of different angles, so keep that in mind. I haven't had that issue yet, but it is something I am expecting in the near future. Now, if you want to partner it up, say with the high-grade Savior from way back in the day, you can do another one of those cool slashing poses and cut off the arm like we saw in Gundam Seed Destiny. Unfortunately, the Savior has the old peg system there, so it looks a little awkward. But there are quite a few suits that you can put with the Freedom, notably the Savior and the Force Impulse, that would look pretty good. You can also do the Jin and the Seagyu, but it was rare that they would have any kind of combat directly. Usually it was the Freedom just destroying Jins and Seagyus and not really getting into sword fights with them. If you want to give the Savior a chance to defend itself, you absolutely can, and it still looks good. This is one of the poses I like the most for the Freedom. I think extending the legs down helps get rid of that kind of short leg look that it has, and as long as you sweep those railguns back, they don't look as bad, they don't take up as much room and shadow the legs. And then you have the chest angled down with its little pointy red section, the beam sabers coming across, and the wings not fully splayed out, but splayed out enough to make it look like it's in flight. You can move this around any really which way. I didn't have any problems with getting it to actually meet sabers with the Freedom or the Savior. So any kind of close quarter combat, you shouldn't have too many problems as long as it's up on a stand. Now another angle of this, because I just thought it looked cool. It does look a little bit more impressive from a higher angle like this, so kind of keep that in mind as where you're putting it on your shelf. If your shelf is typically above your line of sight, you may want a slightly different pose than this, but if you do have it a little bit lower, you're going to get kind of that top-down view of the Freedom, and it still looks very, very good. And I thought it would just be fun to use the clear color version to do kind of an after image thing here, and well, I don't think I did it perfectly. I think it is close enough. So if you do have the clear color exclusive version of this, you can pull off a very similar type setup for photography or just putting on your shelf. I don't have them like this on my shelf at the moment, but I do think it is actually a very cool looking effect. And surprisingly enough, if you want to get it in a kneeling pose, you can do that. I was actually kind of surprised by this. I thought the wings would be a little bit more of a problem as far as being too high to actually get the Freedom to get down on its feet and knees, but it actually works, and it looks pretty good. I feel like this is a pose we saw in the anime, but I can't 100% remember, to be honest. So if it did, you can pull it off. If not, but you still like it, you can do so. As you will notice here, though, the beam sabers are not in the side skirts, and well, there's a good reason for that. One thing as far as a functional aspect of this suit that I quite detest is how those beam sabers are held in, because they're not held in almost at all. Well, something like the high-grade Cosmic Era Infinite Justice does this better. It still has a very similar issue with those beam sabers not being held in very well, neither knocking another part off in the Infinite Justice, or just falling out of the side skirt here with the Freedom. You can fix this either by re-squishing and tightening the side skirts there. Anytime you move the rail cannons, they usually get loose, but if you do, as I said before, with the wrists, add a little bit of super glue or polish, you may be able to add a little friction and keep them in there. Now, as we look at comparisons, you already saw it with the clear color version, but here you go back to back with it, and I still think, as cool as the clear color version is, I do like the solid colored anime accurate version, but it is cool to have them side by side. So if you do like the clear colors, or if you already have it, it doesn't necessarily fully nullify getting just the regular release. Here we have it against the Strike, its competitor in the series of videos, and as I said earlier, I still quite like the Strike, but the Freedom has grown on me quite a bit. I think the Strike is going to be hard to beat, to be honest, but the Freedom is not nearly as problematic in terms of posing as I thought it would be, and the more I posed it around and the more I looked at it, the less those particular proportional issues came into effect. I still almost 100% believe that it is the side skirts, but if you guys have a different perspective on that, do let me know in the comments below. Here we have it against its real grade counterpart, and as I said, the real grade is going to have more surface detail, and largely the proportional issues are the same, even though there's a lot more color separation and part separation in general. Also, I would like to note that the beam sabers like to fall out on both, so more parts, more complicated gimmicks do not actually make any of this work any better. And it really comes down to what you prefer. If you're going to set it on your shelf, forget it, and just appreciate it as a nice looking thing, the real grade might be for you. But if you do occasionally like to repose your kits, I would definitely say the high grade is your better bet, because even standing the Freedom real grade here was the most frustrating part of this video. And here we have it against its Master Grade counterpart in the Master Grade Freedom 2.0, and this is the comparison that kind of drew me back on the head being too big, as the head is somewhat oversized for the stylized Freedom 2.0. Now, if you do have the more anime-accurate high-grade comparative to this and put them on a shelf together, as you can see, they do look quite good together. And even if you have the older version 1 Master Grade that is much closer to the high grade in at least its base design, a little bit more anime-accurate, it's still going to look good and still be a fairly interesting dynamic on your shelf. And you can make the "don't talk to me or my son ever again" memes. Overall, I quite enjoyed this. Is it the best high grade out there? No. Is it the best in this series so far? Probably not, but it has given me some food for thought. If you like to pose around seed kits and you like just a nice, clean, simple build, the high-grade Cosmic Era Freedom is a solid choice. However, if you don't particularly care about high grades, you want something more detailed or more complex or more challenging, or you just don't like Seed or the Freedom, then this is a pass. But otherwise, I would say this is a must-have if you're a Seed fan and just cannot get enough Freedom. After all, Gunpla is Freedom, I guess. Anyway, I've been the Spicer here for the Gunpla Network. Please do your best to stay safe and keep on building.